Hey, what's up everyone? DREAGEN here to tell you that you should be watching Dragon Ball Super Broly. So Dragon Ball Super Broly, say that 3 times fast, is the latest installment in the long-running illustrious Dragon Ball series, and is the follow-up to the Dragon Ball Super series. This one officially introducing the title character Broly into the canon. Now, what I mean by that is that prior to this, Broly was featured in the Dragon Ball Z films, which are kind of considered expanded universe stories. They don't really fit into the main chronological canon of the franchise. They're just kind of like side stories. So Broly, while it becoming one of the most famous and most popular Dragon Ball Z characters, unfortunately was never official, meaning he was not created by series creator Akira Toriyama. He was always a side character, but because of his popularity, he was always featured in numerous games, films, spin-offs, toys, and other forms of promotional material. Even like there was a thing at Universal Studios Japan where it was like a VR experience where you could team up with Goku and Vegeta and fight Broly. He was just that popular of a character. So when Toei Animation approached Toriyama to do a Dragon Ball Super film, there was a big push on the part of the studio, surprise surprise, to incorporate Broly. And this is wanted to, even though he was not initially created by Akira Toriyama, they really kind of stressed him that he is an extremely popular character that the fans really love, and to have him officially included in the canon would be a very big deal for the fans and the franchise as a whole. So Toriyama agreed to do this and essentially kind of sat down, watched the Broly films, and kind of studied up on the character and decided that while visually a very cool character, not much to him, unfortunately. So retooled his whole background, gave him a new origin story, essentially made him a whole new character, but retained the savagery and the brutality of his character when he fights, and maintaining his huge muscle-bound, hulked-out form, which is quite honestly what most people really like about Broly, because beyond that, there really wasn't much to the character. He was just a raging psychopath, essentially. That was pretty much it. So in terms of giving him a new characterization, it was really, kind of sky's the limit. So this is really the first time we've seen this character with an in-depth personality, with some kind of characterization, and essentially making him a character and not just a mindless force of destruction. And the way they did that is actually really interesting. I'm not going to spoil anything, but kind of the secret to Broly's power is kind of revealed in a very creative way, tapping deep into Dragon Ball lore. But aside from just the action and the fun and just the excitement of seeing this amazing character finally brought into the official canon of the franchise, this film does something that Dragon Ball has sometimes struggled to do. When I say Dragon Ball, by the way, I'm referring to the franchise as a whole. So Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, and yes, even Dragon Ball GT, which for those who don't know, was the original sequel series to Dragon Ball Z, which was not created by Toriyama, and it was kind of not well received by the fandom. So this Super was more or less kind of a retconned continuity for that. But regardless, Dragon Ball has always excelled at action and excitement, but not always on story and drama. I mean, when it does do it, and when it does do it, it's done it very well. But unfortunately, more often than not, the drama of the narratives take a distant backseat sometimes to the action. This film has successfully merged the two. This is the most well-rounded Dragon Ball thing ever. It is a very story-driven film that relies heavily on the narrative and the characterization of the character and the drama of their backstories, while not skimping on the action, which is animated to such a superb degree that I could literally make a whole video of just how fucking cool this movie looks. But the big takeaway I walked out of everything, what I was actually surprised, was this was the narrative, was the story, was the drama. And one of the big takeaways I came out with it was actually, Broly is essentially the product of an abusive parent. I mean, if you're familiar with the original Dragon Ball Broly film from the 90s, you know, obviously his father Paragus was much more of a figure who was trying to get revenge for being wronged when his youth, and you know, was dealing more with a destructive child who was kind of out of control and was essentially a born psychopath. And his means of controlling his son and reining his power in was more or less done out of really love and concern for his son. This time around, you know, Broly still has this innate power, this incredible ability to just rise to the occasion. But rather than be just a wanton force of destruction, Broly very much is a kid who is essentially just raised in a bad situation, and where he would have needed love and kind of attention. He had an attentive parent. He was essentially given a father who was just trying to turn him into an instrument of destruction to kind of enact his own revenge. He was turning his son into, you know, a tool. He didn't do anything in this film, as opposed to in the original, out of love. I mean, he cared for his son. It wasn't just like he doesn't care at all, but his desire for revenge and his desire to turn his son into a weapon or an instrument of his revenge greatly overshadowed his parental affinity for his child. And because of this, you realize that Broly was very much just a child who has an amazing ability and amazing power, and who has no idea how to use it. When you see the power taking over, this rage, this anger, you realize that there are probably moments in Broly's head where he is scared and confused, but he's being driven by such a rush of power that he literally just cannot control himself and doesn't know what to do with himself. There's moments where in that rage where he's being battled and confronted and being pitted against an adversary who is forced to rise to the occasion to meet him, and the moment where we should be like pumping our fists in the air and cheering that the heroes look like they're getting the upper hand and are beating, you know, the bad guy, you almost feel heartbroken, because in that moment you see Broly is scared and confused, and that his drive to fight is not done so by this bloodlust, but rather this instinctive urge to fight. That when Broly feels scared or threatened, if it's fight or flight, for Broly it will always be fight. He does not have the instinct for flight. He cannot run, and because of that, he is doomed to perhaps put himself in a position one day, or find himself in a position one day where a tactical retreat might be the wise thing to do, and he is incapable of doing that. That he might die, not because he's a bloodthirsty killer, but because his body, his mind, his Saiyan instinct will not allow him to do what he might want to do. So in those moments, he is trapped in himself and scared and confused, but unable to remove himself from a situation that might ultimately kill him. And that really is a tragedy of Broly, that he essentially, his power is almost like a disability, in that it takes over him and he cannot control himself, and he becomes a passenger in his own mind, and that he is forced to kind of do battle. So when on the outside you see like this unstoppable force of, you know, destruction, you realize when you get the moments at the end, those glimpses in his eyes, and you realize, I know he's in there and he is confused and does not really understand what's going on, and probably have given the choice before the anger took over, would have chose to not even be there. That he is very much a victim of this power, that when you see him beating his opponent mercilessly, you realize that essentially that's what's happening to his mind, to his psyche. He's being pummeled and beaten, and he just cannot get away from it. So Broly has turned into a very tragic figure in this, almost Shakespearean, if you know, if I'm not overreaching by saying that. And you find yourself kind of hoping it does come to an end for his sake, because you realize that his state of being is his own living hell, and that his power was never reined in, you never taught to control it, because he was always wanting to be used as a weapon. So his power was controlled for him by means of implementation of his father, rather than just teaching him how to harness it and making it a part of him. His father turned it into an affliction. Kind of think a little bit of Bruce Banner and the Hulk, where, you know, now I notice in the comics Bruce can kind of control the Hulk to some degree, but the classic Hulk is always Bruce Banner loses control and he's forced to kind of, watch from behind Hulk's eyes as Hulk causes all this destruction, and he's powerless to stop Hulk from doing it. They're two characters, and this is very much how Broly is portrayed in this film, is that once it takes over, that's it. Speaking of Hulk, there's a great little, I don't know if they did this on purpose or not, but it makes me think of the scene in the first Avengers movies where Hulk just starts, bashing Loki back and forth on the ground, and there's a great moment where Broly is doing that to one of our protagonists in the film, and I just couldn't help but thinking about that. And Ashley was next to me even saying the same thing, and the fact that he's got like a greenish outfit around him now just made me think of Hulk all the more. He's green and purple, and I remember the original Hulk shows used to have the purple pants or ripped up shorts or whatever, and it's I don't know if that was on purpose or just a funny coincidence, but I got flashbacks to Avengers when I saw that, and Thor Ragnarok too. Just waiting for that quick cutaway to Loki going, see, that's how it feels. But yeah, no, it's a much more dramatic story than I think we've ever seen in Dragon Ball. And Dragon Ball's always had great drama in it, but just how it was expressed. And in the manga, which is the comic book, the drama was much more of a balanced story, but the animation was, they always kind of leaned heavier in terms of the action. But because Toriyama has been involved with Super and this film, you definitely see a more balance, a better degree of balance between drama and action. And this film does a superb job, and there's a lot of great comedy in this too. This movie is literally the perfect encapsulation of what Dragon Ball is. It's got humor, it's got action, it's got drama, and it's got cool characters, and a really well thought out plot that goes into the history of the Saiyans, which is something that I've always been very, very fascinated by, learning more about them. And this film leaves off in a way where you are very, very excited and curious to see where things are going to go from here. And I mean, I like the end of Super, but with that said, you could have ended it there. But I'm glad it seems like they're not. But with this film left off, I am excited in the true sense of the word to see where they're going to go, because they left this film off in such a way where you realize if you ever thought Dragon Ball was getting old or was reaching an end, I get the sense now that we haven't seen anything yet, and I'm very excited for what the future holds for this franchise, and hoping they kind of continue to build off the framework that they created in this film, which, based on the success of it so far, both in its native country Japan and abroad, I think it's safe to say that Toei Animation and Akira Toriyama are probably going to want to do that, because at the end of the day, the show business is still a business, and if someone's making you money, you don't really want to turn a blind eye into that. But anyway, with that said, Dragon Ball Super Broly, have you seen it? If so, what did you think? At the time of this recording, it is currently in theaters. It is where we saw it. I believe it's still in its theater run in Japan, but it's now making the rounds in North America and I think Europe as well. If you have not seen it, when this film becomes available, for home media, I will put links in the description section below. So right now it'll probably just say TBA, to be announced. But the moment this film becomes, and it might even be available for pre-order. Either way, I will put links in the description section below where you can either pre-order it now or just buy it depending on when you watch this video. Highly recommend check it out. And if you've never actually watched Dragon Ball, or Dragon Ball Z, or Dragon Ball Super, or Dragon Ball GT, or anything like that, this is a great movie just to jump into, because it tells you everything you need to know about the Saiyans. It tells you the entire backstory leading up to the Dragon Ball franchise, and everything you pretty much need to know about the Dragon Ball franchise, while telling you what's to come in the future. It sums up pretty much, about 3 decades worth of story pretty well in an hour and 45-minute movie, which is very surprising. So if you're not familiar with Dragon Ball at all, or you've heard about it and you're just not interested because it's that show where everyone yells for 12 episodes before throwing a punch, watch this movie, because it very much captures the very best of what Dragon Ball is. It has all the highlights and what I feel are none of the low points. But anyway, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will catch you in the next one. Peace!